All right, today we are cracking open a historical cold case that's over 3,500 years old. We're on the hunt for the biblical patriarchs Jacob and Joseph, searching for their footprints in the sands of ancient Egypt. Is their story real, verifiable history, or is it just a story? Well, let's dig in.
So let's get right to it. For thousands of years, the story of Joseph has been this incredible cornerstone of faith. But for historians, there's always been this one big question. Is there any actual physical proof that he was ever there? To find out, we have to become detectives ourselves and sift through the evidence.
You know, when you're trying to solve a mystery this old, you can't just wander through all of Egyptian history hoping to get lucky. Nope. You need a specific time and a specific place. So our first move is to build a timeline, using the biblical account as our guide.
And here's how we start to zero in. We can work backward from a pretty solid historical date, the construction of Solomon's Temple. The Bible's own chronology puts the Exodus 480 years before that, and it says Jacob's family entered Egypt 430 years before that. You do the math, and it points us to this remarkably specific year, 1876 BC. That right there becomes our anchor point, our X on the historical map.
Okay, but right away, our very first clue hits a major snag. Genesis tells us that Joseph settled his family in the land of Ramesses. Here's the problem. The famous city of Pi-Ramesses, named after Ramesses the Great, wasn't even built for another 600 years. And on the surface, that looks like a massive, deal-breaking contradiction.
This kind of thing, something that's out of its proper time, is called an anachronism. And honestly, it's the kind of detail that could make a scholar just dismiss the whole story. But this is where the real detective work begins, because the answer is hidden in the way ancient people wrote about places.
And it turns out it's not a historical mistake at all. It's a scribal update. Think about it like this. If you were writing a history of early America, you'd probably write New York, not New Amsterdam, so your readers would know what you're talking about. Well, ancient inscriptions show that scribes did the same thing. The area later called Ramesses was, in Joseph's time, known as Avaris. And just like that, our first puzzle piece clicks into place. We now have our location, the ancient city of Avaris.
So we focus our investigation on Avaris, and this is where things get really exciting, because the evidence on the ground starts to line up with the Bible in a pretty startling way. The Bible says a family from Canaan came into Egypt, and guess what archaeologists find at Avaris from this exact time period? An entire settlement of people they call Asiatics, which is their term for people from, you guessed it, Canaan. They show up right on schedule.
And it gets even more precise than that. In the very first layer of this settlement, archaeologists dug up a stone monument. It was a legal contract, and it had a date carved right into it. And that date? 1874 BC. That is just 2 years after our biblical timeline says Jacob's family would have shown up. I mean, the timing is just uncanny.
But here's the thing. This stone is way more than just a dated contract. After all the legal stuff, the inscription gets personal. The man who paid for it identifies himself in the first person. He says he's a high-ranking official, the head of a household, and then he gives himself a title, Son of Sobek.
Okay, so this name, Son of Sobek, that's our next big clue. But to really get why it's so important, we have to understand who Sobek was to the Egyptians, and why on earth a powerful foreign official would be given a name connected to him.
Sobek was the super-powerful crocodile god of the Nile. He was all about fertility and the power of the pharaoh. He was the one they thanked for the life-giving waters that kept Egypt from starving. Now, stop and think about Joseph's story for a second. What did he do? He saved Egypt by managing a 7-year famine. So, it makes perfect sense that an official who controlled the nation's food and literally saved it from starvation would be given a special name linking him to Sobek.
And this isn't just us guessing. This name, Sobek, which means son of Sobek, shows up on actual artifacts from that time. Official seals that belonged to a man who held the exact same rank as Joseph, the vizier, the second in command to the pharaoh himself. I mean, look at this. When you put them side by side, it's just stunning. The titles found on the seals for this vizier, Sobek, they just echo the descriptions of Joseph's job in the book of Genesis almost word for word. The king's wise man, great controller. It's like you're reading the same job description from 2 different sources. Okay, so our investigation now takes a turn, leading us to a royal cemetery and the tomb of the most powerful official who served under Pharaoh Sesostris III. Now, why is that pharaoh important? Because he's the one who was ruling during the Great Famine. And his vizier's name? Sobekamhat. yet another version of son of Sobek.
And the location of his tomb basically screams his importance. He was buried closer to the pharaoh's pyramid than anyone else, which tells us he was without a doubt the first and most important vizier of that reign. And what's crucial is that this places him serving the famine pharaoh at the exact moment in history that Joseph would have been at the absolute peak of his power. Inside his tomb, an inscription lists all his titles. And one of them is so unbelievable, so extraordinary, it has never been found on any other monument in all of Egyptian history. It reads, "Controller of the entire land." This gave a non-royal person so much power that when a modern Egyptologist first translated it, he actually changed the text because he just refused to believe a vizier could ever have that much authority. But that unbelievable title, it directly mirrors what Pharaoh says to Joseph in the Bible, "I have set you over all the land of Egypt." A claim in the Bible that, for centuries, might have seemed like a bit of an exaggeration until this one-of-a-kind inscription proved that a vizier at Joseph's exact time and place held that very power. But hold on, because here is the final, most stunning piece of the entire puzzle. When archaeologists actually examined the tomb of this incredibly powerful vizier, it was empty. The sarcophagus was there, but the body was gone. It had been removed thousands of years ago.
And this aligns perfectly with how Joseph's story ends. Both Genesis and Exodus tell us that Joseph made his descendants swear an oath. He told them, "Do not leave my body in Egypt. When you leave, you will carry my bones with you to the promised land." An empty tomb, for a man of his incredible stature, is exactly what the biblical story would lead us to expect.
So let's just lay out the case file one more time. You have a man who was second in command, who held a one-of-a-kind title, controller of the entire land, that matches the Bible, who served at the exact right time, and whose body is mysteriously missing from his tomb. The parallels between the historical vizier Sobekemhat and the biblical patriarch Joseph, they're just undeniable.
Which really just leaves us with one final question. Is this all just a string of unbelievable coincidences? Or is this the historical footprint of Joseph, hiding in plain sight for over 3,500 years, waiting in the archaeological record to corroborate one of the Bible's most foundational stories?